Yeah. Welcome to Sunday Live Chat. Oh, yes. Awesome. We've got some very special guests here today. The one, the only, Paul Lemos, and his associate and compatriot. Now, I'm not sure if I'm going to get this right. Is it Chad?
Yeah, that's totally fine.
Chad SB.
Yeah.
Chad SB. Welcome, guys. This is like a pleasure to have you here and joining us here today.
Great to see you, Kevin.
Man, it's been a while, Paul.
It has been a long time.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the last time that we spoke face to face was in New York City, maybe at what was the tour when Nine Inch Nails opened for you?
Well, that would have been 1988, and we had an idea to do a show together with you, and then oddly, that was at Irving Plaza, and then
right.
oddly enough, it kind of turned into a band which never had an album out yet, got put on the bill. I'm not too sure for by who or whatever, but that turned out to be Nine Inch Nails, and we were witness to it.
Oh yeah, well, you know,
I have a ticket stub. I think I have a poster from it too.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's a funny thing. Before those guys surfaced, I remember having a meeting with Joe McEwen at Intro, and they hadn't even put a record out, but he was saying, you know, I'm not sure about you guys, but he said, but if I could get a band like Nine Inch Nails, I'd pay big money for that. And they hadn't even surfaced yet. So it's interesting that there was a buzz about that record well before it even came out.
That is true. I was trying to figure that out at the time. Like, were they on a label yet even? I mean, I thought it was like
they were on TBT.
Yeah, TBT.
Yeah, I think they were on TBT actually when they played with you, but they were basically an unknown entity. And it was very hippie-esque. I remember keyboards on the floor and candles, you know.
I remember enjoying playing with you. I mean, obviously, I was a fan before I met you, and it was so great to, you know, it's always so great to be able to see someone play. So what exactly is it that you played in 1988 live when you were playing after Nine Inch Nails?
Well, when I don't remember when we played with Nine Inch Nails.
Would that have been you and the Chris Moriarty, Joe Papa lineup? Or was it?
Yeah, that was the only lineup that we had, but we weren't much of a live band. We were always working with, you know, backing tape and, you know, brought a 2-track reel-to-reel on stage, and sometimes it would be running backwards and we wouldn't realize that we had the tape tails out or tails in. we were just a mess. We played with Ministry at the Ritz, I remember, with KMFDM, and, you know, we were on Wax Trax and trying to do the whole kind of industrial thing, but it was never really a natural kind of performance for me. I was always in that other kind of fuck up in, you know, experimental domain, you know, kind of comfortable in my own privacy.
I think it's amazing that, you know, throughout the years that you have tried and been successful, in my opinion, at so many different sort of genres of controlled bleeding. You know, I have to say that, like, the first time that I ever heard you was this album.
Oh, that record has kind of endured. It's funny that was a good record. That record still sounds nice to me.
So I gotta say, yeah, I just listened to it this morning too, as well as the newer version that you guys have released. You've been compiling them again for Artifact, and did this come out as also songs from the vault, basically kind of different takes of the songs from this album?
Yeah, it did. I mean, I think I pretty much remixed all the pieces, and there were a couple of tracks that, you know, different order, and a couple of tracks that didn't make it. I really had marred that record by putting some noise pieces in it, and it just broke up the continuity.
No.
And
you need to mar it. The great thing about this record was the subtlety of the beauty of what you're tapping into, but then also the grit, and even the warning on it, that special gentle mix. It was like. And then another thing too is that this is on Sterile Records.
Yeah, that's the original one.
So Sterile, you know, I mean, to anybody at the time, when we were younger, you know, you would find out a band say for instance, like Les Mord on
Yeah.
Stereo Records or Nocturnal Emissions, and you'd be like, wait, who are these guys? And but the thing was, it was the perfect complement to the times and also the label. And then when I heard this, I became very addicted to this album. So right off the bat, you know, I went backwards at that point to body samples, and you know, was kind of like seeing that at times you're extremely noise friendly, and I loved it. I loved how it went back and forth between, okay, I want to say, I mean, you must have heard so many people sort of coin classical, medieval, sacred, neo-medieval. Like, what did you feel you were tapping into when you were getting into these melodic sort of structures? I love them.
You mean on Headcrack? It was just a weird.
Uh-oh, we're losing you. Can you hear him, Chad?
No, Paul, we lost your audio, man.
We lost your audio.
Well, he's trying to figure that out. You know, Headcrack was the first controlled bleeding record I ever heard as well, and it's such a good record.
Yeah. I have to say, Paul, we got to fix your audio somehow. Maybe you might want to reset, like come in and leave the chat and come back in.
Okay, yeah.
There you are. There, it's back on all of a sudden.
Yeah, I don't know why the signal is the signal is not consistent. It's strange.
Well, technology these days isn't half as good as you know, as the past, proven point time and time again. But you were saying we're talking about Headcrack.
But Headcrack was a very intuitive thing. It was kind of like we had done, you know, Knees and Bones and these early things, distress signals, and these just experiments in complete, you know, wall-to-wall havoc, you know, and it was all recorded live. And then I think, you know, I came from a place as a guitar player playing really musical work, and when I embarked on a more on the noise of say Knees and Bones, that was kind of just like a purge for me, because generally we were playing really intense guitar oriented music before that. So Headcrack kind of brought me back there as a guitar player. I mean, most of those pieces are guitar based, you know, with loops and either slowed down or processed in some way. And so it was a really kind of easy and natural record for me to make. And then I was able to work with Joe Papa in a little bit different capacity, because I hadn't been able to absorb Joe into the music that I was doing. I knew that he was a talent, but I couldn't find a voice that made sense for the music. And so finally, like our musical personalities seemed to jive. But the funny thing about that record is, Kevin, that Nigel put that thing out, just the demo, and I was very, very upset that he didn't consult me. He just kind of put this thing out through Red Rhino, and I said, no, that can't be the record. That's not the record I wanted to make. And so he and I think we kind of ruptured our friendship, and he did put out the record that I wanted to make, I think, which is the version you have. But the initial one that came out, there were only a few copies. That was a real botched piece. And so it was strange when it came out that it actually, you know, that it actually worked as well as it did.
I'm interested in, because what I hear, I mean, I said to you at first, what's your rig? And you were saying, well, I'm mostly just guitar, but I kind of envisioned some layers of electronics or something because of the sound that you achieve and stuff like that. But take us into the world. I mean, I know you know, Knees and Bones, it was like a live to cassette style recording, I gather, era of controlled bleeding and the cassettes. And then what Body Samples is like, where you actually get a 4-track recorder, are able to enjoy sort of like the essence of overdubbing.
Yeah, that combined the 2-track, the cassette overload, saturation, and some more experiments in texture. Yeah. So and then Headcrack kind of furthered that sense of ambience that appeared in Body Samples. That stuff seems like a lifetime ago to me.
It is a lifetime ago.
It really is.
It really is, you know.
But like the stuff that Chad and I are doing presently, a lot of the process that we use is so similar to what we did back then. You know, it's a lot of looping and taking guitar sounds and processing them and speeding them up, slowing them way down, and, you know, kind of you know, not necessarily using a lot of electronics sometimes when you might think that that's the, you know, the origin of the sound.
See, I gather, are you originally from New York, or did you come from Boston?
Well, I was born in Chicago and my family comes from Boston. So I spent a lot of time up there in the summers, and I had a group of friends and a strange group of musicians that really I started playing with up there. And then when I'd come home, I'd kind of continue it. But I was learning up there with those guys, and then, you know, I'd come in and I'd be in school in New York. So
And is that where
being in Boston was where I had fun. Being in New York was all business, and it still is.
Is that where you met Paul or Chris and Joe when you came to New York, or was it basically
Chris was my neighbor and considerably younger than I was, and when we needed a drummer, Chris just happened to be there, and he was always listening to the crazy shit that was coming out of my house, and, you know, very interested in the experiments that would be going on over here. And Joey answered an ad that we were looking for a singer back for another lineup when we were doing an instrumental thing. We were playing CBGBs as a, you know, as a guitar, bass, drums group, and we wanted to incorporate a vocalist. And so we got this, you know, 300-pound guy in a snorkel jacket with a Roland Space Echo, and he came down and auditioned, and he was just so far out of it. I mean, like, there was nothing he was just way out there. But I knew Joey had genius. I mean, you could see. So he basically broke up that lineup of the band. So, yeah, but Joe comes from the local area too. Yeah, so Chris, he was my next door neighbor. He just was absorbed because he was there.
I think that's typically how bands get formed. I mean, you grab the closest thing that you can, you know, the closest drummer that actually can do it. But I mean, Joe Papai did he come along and start humming one day, or sort of like start vocalizing, and you realize, oh my God, this guy's like an operatic superstar.
Well, Kevin, we did an audition, right? We put this thing out, you know, for Vocalist, and I said, I think one of the interests was Henry Cow magazine, you know, and just this varied, I don't even know if magazine existed at the time, but just a varied lineup of things. And so he saw Henry Cow and he came down, and he was just deep into prog. If Joey could have had his ideal band, he would have been doing like Ian Gillan or the guy in Rush, screaming at the top of his lungs and in a kimono with banks of keyboards. You know, he had no interest whatsoever in the things that I was interested in. So it's amazing that we kind of had a meeting of the minds and we could work together. But no, he came down with a Roland Space Echo, and he did this 20-minute piece called the Octadragon Suite that just blew my mind. It was a solo vocal piece with echo, and it was just this wild operatic creation. That was his thing. You know, the guy was just like from another friggin' zone. He was great.
Did you ever hear, of course you probably heard of Bourbonese Quack?
Sure.
I mean,
yeah, they're friends.
Yeah.
We were out on the road with them in Europe one time.
See, that's what I always would think, because I really love the sound of what this I don't even know what you call, like, it's funny that they called it industrial, but it's, you know, it's like a little bit of noise gets applied, and then all of a sudden that moniker gets applied to your, you know, your career, basically.
Yeah, you see, I don't remember what Bourbonese Quack sounds like. I just remember Simon and those guys, and they were great live, but I don't remember the records at all.
It was a cross between sort of like that classical, could be classical guitar, very, I'll call it like Dwayne and I used to call them crier melodies. So semi-sad, sort of very evoking sort of like a deep thought. And then all of a sudden noise kicks in. And with them, it would be like an abrupt page change, and then it would be into like a home sounded recorded drum kit with some really nice, you know, screaming vocals on it. It still ages really well. The albums actually are amazing. And kind of like how I feel about some of the albums of your guys that, you know, really struck a chord with me at the time, like music from the Scourging Ground.
Now, had you had Skinny Puppy develop during that period when Headcrack and those things were coming out?
You know, we were just what Headcrack was, what, 86?
I don't remember. I guess something like that.
86. So you guys, we released our first Remission EP in 84, and we had been recording cassette stuff before that. And it's funny that, you know, all the labels that you guys work with, we kind of had a relationship with, speaking to some of them, because in the day, that's what you did, is you traded tapes. And I gather that, is that how you made the introduction to Dossier and some of those, like, I mean, even your relationship with Stereo Records, that had to be from, what was that, the Home Trading Tape Network Association? We used to call it them.
Kevin, I wasn't deep into the cassette network. I've
Oh,
never
wow.
really been part of that. You know, we made cassettes only because it was the only medium by which you could get something to another person musically. I mean, how else
Yep.
could you? So, but it wasn't so much like, you know, cassette trading. I was never into that, you know, that world and mail art. Like, there was a whole kind of American scene of that. And I was way kind of out of the mix, but the cassette was just, you know, like, I remember John Zawiz, one of the early guys that I had known from up in Boston from Sleep Chamber. And, you know, John doesn't get a lot of credit these days, it seems, but he was doing stuff early on. He had a store and he was promoting Throbbing Gristle. And he was one of the guys that, you know, he was putting out these tapes. You know, he wasn't, you know, there was no money to put out albums, but, you know, he was one of the first guys that I had met that really gave me encouragement to, like, wow, you have something interesting here. And he wanted to make that public. So the cassette was just the medium by which somebody could hear you, you know? So yeah, I sent stuff to Cherry Red, and I probably, you know, Nigel, because he was doing similar music that I was, you know, we just, there was a pool of people, Coil and Masami, in Japan. We just kind of all knew each other. It's weird how it, you know, people find each other that have similar musical interests.
Yeah, I found it to be an amazing era. I've, you know, a lot of, like, this collection is called the Rising from the Red Sands cassettes. Basically 5 cassettes that was released. I've talked about this many times, and it introduced, like, all these bands. Sleep Chamber is actually on this.
Were those on Third Mind?
Yep, they were the first thing that Gary released on Third Mind.
Okay, wow.
And, you know, I believe you guys have worked with Third Mind, have you not?
We did. Gary and I had known each other going way back to those, but we worked together when Roadrunner kind of took them over.
Sure.
Yeah, and that was an unfortunate situation for him.
You know, what's amazing is that we could not only talk about Controlled Bleeding today, but really the history of independent music labels as far as their rise and fall and collapses. I mean, you've endured every sort of genre, in the sense of the Wax Trax era and the sub, you know, the Sub Rosa era, basically experiences with everybody outside of the music, having to connect, and how to have your music come out. What's the take on everything now, Paul, after so long, when you look back? Are you a nostalgic person, or do you basically?
I'm not really. Like, I'm always just into the stuff that Chad and I are doing. You know, it's always the most recent work. Like you probably too. You know, you're immersed in the things that you're doing presently. I mean, I haven't picked up an instrument in 3 years, but Chad and I, we have to get back in the fray, because we're working with a label that is one of my favorite labels, a label called Profound Lore. I don't know if you listen to bands like Portal.
Hey, here we go, another new label we need to learn about, folks.
Profound Lore is great. It's run by a Canadian named Chris Bruni, and he does. I mean, it's just, our label mates are the most extreme of extreme. I mean, you know, you listen to a band like Portal or Impetuous Ritual. Yeah. Holy cow! I mean, that's serious shit.
Portal made an impact on me. My black metal friend from Sweden. He's from Sweden. He was living in Norway, but either country gets credentials on that. In that department, he played me Portal in Japan, and I was just like, okay, this is next level.
Oh yeah, I mean, those guys. But they also, those guys do a band called Impetuous Ritual too, which is equally severe. It's just this massive, murky, kind of hellish. I don't know. I mean, it's just such extreme music. But yeah, so, like, I'm excited to be working with Profound Lore. They're going to reissue some of the Skin Chamber and hopefully do a new Controlled Bleeding thing. And that gives me kind of a new lease on things. I mean, I'm not going to try and compete with Portal, but I've got ideas now. So,
this is awesome. I guess the last thing really in the press is that you had said in 2020 that you had kind of, like, stepped aside for a little bit. Did you get has this refreshed you, the whole COVID experience and this whole thing coming out? Has it given you a different inspiration?
Not me at all. It's a strange thing because I mean, COVID didn't really affect me. I mean, being a school teacher, which is normally what I do, I just kind of did what I always do. And I hadn't been in the fray musically at all. So it didn't really affect me. I have no studio of my own anymore. So I was just kind of in creative limbo for however long, but I didn't really want to be doing music. I don't know. I think before the pandemic, the experience that we'd had just kind of blew us all out for a while. So for me, the pandemic didn't really affect me musically one way or the other or creatively. It didn't give me a desire to kind of get going again. It was kind of time in limbo. It's strange. Those days even, like Chad, we were saying, right? Married 4 years or whatever, but it was like 2 of them are limbo years.
It's true. But, the second you were like, we're done, on Facebook, that's when I realized, oh, maybe we're not doing anything right now. I told Heather, it's like, this guy can't stop making music. It's like, yeah, just wait a little bit and he'll call me up and be like, oh, I've got some ideas. And sure enough, that's what happened.
Yeah. Incredibly prolific career, Paul. Some 30 plus albums. If we had to go through them all, we could be here for the rest of the day. But, as I said, the take is certain albums leave a mark on people. When I announce the chat, I've had people, say, oh, this is their favorite and this is their favorite. And it's, never really the same. I don't know. I always saw it as being like you should have been perfect for, I don't know why film hasn't picked you or didn't pick you up more, embrace you more, because you're like painting the most bombastic pictures at times that were just like completely unique.
Kevin, it's a game. I think it's a business game. Like, you have to play that game. And I think working full time, I mean, both of us, we've always had jobs. You just can't devote yourself to the game of it and the marketing of it.
Right,
so
yeah.
we've never been business people, and I think that's kind of it. Film has come to me in little bits and pieces, just chance things. When I try to respond and maybe find somebody to represent us and try to make inroads, nothing ever happens that way. It's always by chance.
It's I don't know, man. How when you're a fan of music, you always think it should be more popular than it is. I mean, it happens all the time. But like music for Stolen Icons with Joe Papa, it's like really just like beautiful album. It's just like people just need to be able to be exposed to that cinematic sort of classical element. I don't know if Songs from the Ashes was a compilation of The Scourging Ground and the Gilded Chambers.
It was.
Yeah. And so in a lot of times people might be confused by the amount of releases, but you're kind of known for taking your old releases and kind of like wanting to improve them, or wanting to, in your eyes, improve them, maybe add extra tracks and in a lot of cases this recent is it your association with Artifact which has allowed you to go back and put all these packages together the way that you've wanted to?
Well, those packages, they wanted to put them out as they were originally, like Headcrack. They wanted to reissue that record as close to the original as possible. And so I really did. I had to work to assemble it and take a couple of tracks off of vinyl because the masters were not available to me. They wanted to put out Distress Signals for whatever reason on vinyl, so I didn't really. So I didn't really care too much about, kind of doing the pure reissue of the albums because I don't even have a turntable.
No way.
Oh yeah, I don't have a turntable. Records. I sold off about 20,000 records to Ron Lassard at RR Records, and it was like just getting rid of a noose around my neck. But Artifact wanted to put out, kind of like for the purists, those versions. But it really. I was perfectly happy with the CD versions that we had done.
Now this album, forgive me, Chad, for talking about the past for so long and stuff, but I mean, Larva Lumps and Baby Bumps, it's like really, I mean, is it kind of like a cathartic release for you, Paul, now when you're going to make music that it has to have a release of like some natural, pure form of natural aggression.
I mean, it always seems to be bubbling under. I think it might just be part of one's personality. I know that, Chad and I, we always seem to go back to that. Like when we work, I think Chad is much more into doing more ambient music, but for whatever reason, I don't know why, it always kind of comes back to that high aggression. And that, I mean, Chad assembled that long piece. I could never, ever have done that. That's strictly Chad's work. And, perks of being a perv for me was, it took things as far as we could take them. So I'm hoping that with Profound Lore, we can pick up from the last 3 minutes of that album, the perks of being a perv, and that's going to be the extension. So that's where we're picking things up. I'm hoping for the next part.
But that song's a bit of that song's a bit of an obsession for you too, though. That particular loop we've worked with so long, for so many years now. We burned out trying to do that live, and then stepped away from things and came back and recorded it, burned out and stepped away, and then came back and tried to live again. That song's exhausting.
Oh, you must be completely sick of it, because you've had to rework that in how many permutations?
I mean, there's at least 3 that we've released of that particular one, with the 4th that you've been having ideas about now.
But when we worked so hard to perfect that live, we created some beautiful piece with that. It was a complete recreation of it, and we never documented it. And that's, I guess, kind of what maybe we'll end up doing somehow. But yeah, before we stopped, we really were onto something.
Is that Perks Moonlight Perversion?
That's one of them. That's kind of the slower ambient version of it. And then we did a version with Tony's drums on the remix album that came out after that. And then
and Tony goes all the way back to what, Boston?
Oh, Tony goes back. No, he's a Massapequan. That guy's as New York as you can get. He worked in the manholes in New York City for about 25 years.
That'll do it.
Serious story. He and I were doing, it wasn't really a band. We were calling it Controlled Bleeding, but it was him playing drums and a bass loop and me just playing guitar, and we'd go around as Controlled Bleeding and would play these dumpy shitholes in Brooklyn and New York City, and nobody cared that we were even there. Like, nobody knew Controlled Bleeding. None of the kids in Brooklyn knew anything about it. So we go up to the Shea Stadium, drag our stuff up there. The minute we get up there, the guys take us back to the bathroom. They think that we're the plumbers, Meol and me, Tony and me, that are there to fix the toilets. Swear to God. I said, no, we're the entertainment.
Shit, that's too funny. Did we lose your mic again? We lost your mic again. We lost your mic again. You got to do something with your mic.
It was that round of shows where I met Tony, and then he introduced me to Paul, and they're kind of just playing around with the guitar bass loop combo.
Okay, my connection was gone for a while.
Yeah, I think it just fades out for a millisecond or two. But I mean, what was the inspiration that made you choose the certain sort of? I mean, were you also the bass player, Paul?
Oh yeah, I play bass too. Bass, the guitars, yeah.
So you are the guitar man, no matter what stringed instrument it's going to be coming to Paul.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, that's just always the way it's worked out. Chad plays too, rhythm guitar and whatever. But generally, I'm comfortable as a guitar player.
You're uncomfortable?
No, I am. I'm always comfortable as a guitar player. Going, way back to playing CBGBs.
Yeah.
In that lineup, I mean, I always just like to play guitar.
What were the challenges of playing at CBGBs back then with a band that had bass loops?
Oh, well, we didn't play. That was a whole different thing. When we were playing at CBGBs, we were playing with bands like Suicide, Kevin, if you can believe that. I mean, it goes back to playing with Suicide, and Suicide, everybody hated more than they hated us. Like, they just fucking hated Suicide. And Alan was out there punching the audience and exchange with the whole thing. There was nobody there for them. But we were both opening for my friend's band, Brian Setzer, who I grew up with in Massapequa. We were best buddies, and he had a group before the Stray Cats called the Bloodless Pharaohs. And so we'd play CBGBs with them. And it was just, we just played and played. It was kind of like Mahavishnu, I always say, kind of meets the Ramones, that aesthetic. And then just finally it imploded. You couldn't do anything more with it. The addition of Joe Papa completely destroyed the band.
How I'm going to ask, hopefully your sound will fade back in. How did the noise element sort of get invoked into that after coming from that sort of world?
Well, I just think that what had happened was we just played so hard and so intensely playing live, and no one cared. Like people just were not into the guitar-driven fusion-esque punk music. So finally, when it imploded after all that work and after all that just real blood and sweat, I mean, seriously, like we'd play so hard, we'd just rip the fucking strings off the guitar, just bust everything up. I mean, it would just culminate in such aggression that it was kind of like this purge to just create something that had nothing to do with musical parameters. You know what I mean? And so the noise was kind of, for me, the next step in just kind of pure venting. You know what I mean? Just get all those friggin' poisons out in one shot, and then I could go back to music again.
Something brought out a very unique style that would become kind of like controlled bleeding signature for years to come. And it's like that combination of, as I was saying before, very beautiful, emotional, a loop of some kind that draws you in, and then some sort of thing. And I mean, that's not really like, of course, thinking about CBGBs and stuff. So you kind of like, melting out into one world, but obviously very capable of showing that you like in things like Skin Chamber, where you're not like incapable of strolling into areas that are obviously a completely different room altogether. But the purity of controlled bleeding, I mean, forgive me about mentioning this, but I don't see anywhere in the press anybody talking about Chris or Joe's passing. I mean, what do you mind talking about that for a second?
No, I don't. No, not at all. I mean, it's a strange thing because I don't think that we're really that much on the radar in terms of, major music or major bands. So I don't think there's, I mean, there were a lot of people that contacted me privately, but yeah, nothing was really mentioned about them, I don't think.
It wasn't.
It was just, they died within 2 years of each other. Yeah, Chris had a heart attack out in Phoenix, Arizona. We hadn't played anymore. We hadn't played for quite a long time, but we were talking about maybe getting back together and doing a third Skin Chamber record. And then I got the news. I saw it actually as I'm on the internet. I see something about the death of Chris Moriarty. And then about 10 minutes later, I get a phone call from his, from his brother out in Arizona. And it was a complete shock to me. It's too bad because Chris was struggling with some addiction problems over time, and he was having a hard time, but he really had gotten his life back on track, and life was going very well for him. And then it was just this sudden loss. And then 2 years later, Joey died in the middle of the night from a massive heart attack. He had real health problems for a long time, but it was just, that was it.
I always find that for me too, it's like losing my two partners. It's like the most life is real moments, when you lose your musical partners. So did it, like, I know that happened in 2008 and 2009, and you've got some time to put it in its place, but did it have a big effect on you?
It did. It kind of left me just, again, kind of leaving music and just not really wanting to pursue anything. They were my buddies. That's the thing. We were close. I mean, Joey and I were particularly close. He was kind of like the brother that I love and hate. It was, but we were very close. Chris and I hadn't been buddies for a long time, but I cared for Chris. Yeah, it was very tough on a personal level. And, I was kind of a little bit lost musically. And then a guy named Mike Bazzini, who also worked with Chad and I in the last lineup of the group, got in touch, and and Tony, some old friends, kind of got back to playing guitar and just having some fun and getting my chops back. And then over a course of maybe a year and a half, things start to sound actually really good with what Tony and I were playing, and we absorbed a keyboard player and started doing this thing in New York, playing just kind of playing live, but calling it controlled bleeding, which was really the mistake. But yeah, it just, it was a while though. And then, of course, meeting Chad, which was fortuitous because I met Chad doing one of those gigs where with Tony, and Chad happened to like the band, and we met and we became friends and musical partners. But it took a couple of years to kind of find myself again. Now, you had mentioned the loss of 2 musical partners. I, of course, knew the loss of Dwayne.
Phil Western, he died, almost 3 years ago. He was the guy that I worked with on Download. And,
okay. Wow.
and my other side projects, but he also was close with Dwayne. So basically, we were a trio of friends, much like that. And I found it's a huge factor for staying kind of like in tune with your musical side, because you're able to go and be, have another career doing what you do outside, being a teacher. That probably gives you a moment of relief away from having to think about music. I'll bet that after that you probably said, I think I'm just going to think about this for I mean,
Kevin, the weird thing is that I don't think about music or think of myself as a musician day to day.
Yeah.
I usually am so absorbed in the unbelievable amount of work I have to do as a teacher, which I've been doing now. This is my 41st year. So it's kind of like the music, has kind of I don't have time for it until I can just stop working for a while. But yeah, so much of my life is occupied by having to deal with the amount of work I have as a teacher and I think that's kept me, that's kind of saved me, because if I did devote myself to doing music, I think I wouldn't have done very well in life. I think I would have been chronically depressed and kind of, I really do. I think I would have spiraled down a very bad hole. Oh, it's true. It's like teaching kept me in the world, grounded. I had to always, every day, I got to find compassion and be positive, even though I may not be positive in myself. I've got to go into that room and be there for kids that are kind of, needing that kind of energy. And so, yeah, no, the teaching was a gift to me. I mean, I see a lot of guys that, have been in bands for years and years and kind of on that cusp of success. And it's a pretty harrowing existence, So yeah,
I agree. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. I mean, let's say, my wife is laughing over there. I like how you laugh when it's real too.
No, but you guys are in a different place than but there's so many bands that, that are kind of living that, like on that edge of some success, but never really making it, and it's a grueling existence for a lot of the bands, a lot of guys that don't know anything but doing a band.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of feel a bit sad for people that, they're young and they have high hopes and they're in it and they, you don't want to break it to them. They'll be like, looking for some inspirational words, and you'd be like, quit.
Those are the best words.
Well, it is terribly frustrating because, like, if Chad and I weren't working, we would be creating a lot of very interesting stuff right now. So I think we're both quite frustrated, being weighted down with a job. If we could kind of do what we wanted and were liberated, I think that we'd have a lot of potential right now to do some very creative stuff.
Chad, look at that studio. It's ready to go back there.
Yeah, this is the bedroom.
That's just the
bed's
bedroom.
right there.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm gathering that the birth of something new is upon us here, guys.
Oh,
Yeah,
it
I
is.
hope so.
It's got to gestate. It's gestating. But the question is, and Chad only lives in Brooklyn, but getting from Long Island to Brooklyn is really a bitch in of itself. I mean, when you talk about 2 and 3 hour traffic jams, dealing with New York City, it's just
It's such a drag. You spend the whole day teaching, then you get in the car, you spend an hour and a half, 2 hours getting out there to play for 3 or 4 hours, and then it's another hour back to wake up and teach again in the morning. It's a drag.
Yeah. I mean, that is quite a haul. The Warriors did it kind of quicker though, didn't they?
Are we talking about the film?
Yeah, for sure, man. I thought that was a Long Island institution.
Warriors, God.
Yeah. Well, like
So,
us,
Kevin, the
us
interesting
from that
thing though,
era, Paul, remember when we used to talk? We used to talk on, I'm going to say it was in the 80s, around 80, 88 or 89. Me and you would call. We'd we'd have talks about music and labels. And what's really funny is I have a conversation of Paul with him where it somehow ended, a bit of it got recorded and it ended up on one of those albums by the Flu.
I don't have any memory of this.
I hope this is embarrassing.
I don't think I even told you, but it's like you were just talking, and it's just like a snippet of your voice on a cassette that ended up in a tape loop, and it says it's something like, "Oh yeah, you were talking about a band that you had seen playing live. Oh, they were playing this and this and this." I'll send you a link to it, but it was funny because it's on one of those albums that, as you say, what Artifact put out, you don't even know why they want to put out some of these old noise albums, but yeah, they put out this one too.
Huh. Oh yeah, I don't know it at all.
Yeah. So, well, I'm looking
the
forward
interesting
to
thing I wanted to mention to you, Kevin, was we're talking about teaching, was I had to make a very definite decision. You had offered me that tour that Nine Inch Nails did with you. You said, listen, if you guys, can do it. And so that was kind of the point where I went into the office and talked to my principal and I said, look, I need this amount of time off. And he told me, he said, he can't set that precedent. He said, you have to decide whether you want to maintain this job or you want to, take this tour. And so I did. At that point, it was like, wow, this is shit. I really want to go out and I want to play with you guys. I want to do this, but I was too much of a chicken. I had to keep myself in the real world. But yeah, I remember that was like a fateful decision for me.
It was, hey, Rihanna, can you shut the turntable off in there? Yeah, it's running. It ran off the end of the record. We should probably sample this. You guys can't hear it probably. It's just a really low white noise rumble. So I'm imagining, Chad, you've been working with Paul. When did you come into the picture?
Maybe 8 years ago.
8 years ago. So you were on. Look at your history here. Where did you start out in the recording history?
I started releasing stuff around 93, just cassette releases in Virginia, 4-track recordings. And then when there was the option to release things on CD, I started doing that all independently. At one point we had signed with Invisible, but that was like right on the cusp of them not really releasing anything anymore. And so commercially, anything I'd been released had been self-released for probably a couple decades prior to meeting up with Paul.
And what was that released as?
That stuff was called Things Outside the Skin. That was mainly the stuff I was doing for a while, and then a bunch of solo releases under my name.
But it's spelled differently. It's spelled.
Oh yes, CHVAD.
And CHVADSB.
Yeah, just initials. And my mom had fat fingered my name one day, sending me an email, and there was a V in there, and I was like, that'd be easier to Google search than my name, which just yields in a bunch of yuppie douchebags and impoverished country stuff. So I figured the V helped.
So Larva Lumps.
The V confuses most people.
It does.
I know it still confuses me. I said I'm not going to go by that. I reject it completely.
And Baby Bumps. You're moving into the world. I kind of like seeing in my head like Noi meets Butthole Surfers meets the Skin Chamber meets it's like it's a whole new world. It almost seems like it could do really well in Japan.
Well, the Japanese did seem to kind of like that. There was a nice ad. There was a nice advertisement with some, cute Japanese girl with that record tucked under her arm. So it seemed like the Japanese did kind of like that record.
It's John Zorni. It's got a new. Well, certainly. I kind of was saying, Paul, was it time that you were like finally just saying fuck this?
Well, I like
it. I like the vibe on it, and it sounds like you guys are just going for real.
Yeah, well, it covers a lot of ground because it covers like one of the discs is just pure live in Martin Bissey's studio and with Tony playing drums, the kind of infancy of the lineup that would add Chad. So some of it was before Chad actually, you know, hopped into the band. And the live recordings take us back to like way before Knees and Bones. That's the ethic. It kind of takes us back to those days at CBGBs where it's just guitar, drums, and the bass, you know, and those were all just recorded live straight up. And I don't know, I just felt I wanted to preserve them for posterity's sake on that disc. But the real disc, you know, the album proper, that was really a deep collaboration between Chad, me, and this guy Mike Bazzini. And you know, it allowed me, working with Chad and his studio, to do music that was maybe more sophisticated texturally and in terms of the editing that I could, you know, that we could accomplish than anything I'd done, you know. So yeah, it was a very interesting and different level that I was able, and that Chad and I were able to achieve with that record.
Yes, yeah, and great drumming by Tony, and fantastic keys by Mike. You know what's kind of cool is that I kind of hear Psych influence on it too. Were you ever inspired by anything like Brain Ticket?
Was Brain Ticket with Jan Ackerman?
No, this is a Dutch band. His name was Joel van der Broek. And this was around 1970, early 70s. Edward Caspell actually made me get this one day.
Oh, and because I was wondering if, I was wondering if Jan Ackerman had ever played guitar with them.
I don't think so. I think it was a Dutch lineup.
Okay, because Jan Ackerman was a great guitar player in Focus, which was a Dutch band.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
There's no credits for the other musicians on here, but no, but I really like the essence of at times the essence of true Psych is kind of like something that you know, if it's applied, the people, the Psych fans notice that, and I definitely felt that vibe.
Well, we were getting deep into a psychedelic thing in the live set that we had embarked upon, where we before we stopped about 3 years ago, when we were really working really hard on that set, and we were starting to move into deep psychedelic places where songs would just morph into, you know, these kind of wild soundscapes, and just everything would be slowed down, and the rhythm and everything, it was just sounding like it was being played at 16 RPM, and things were going to different, and it was the most exciting music that I know I've done since maybe early Knees and Bones or whatever. We just had tapped into a place that was very psychedelic. But on that record,
we got lucky with Mike.
You know,
I was saying we got lucky with Mike because as a drummer, he was really able to take that stuff into cool places.
Oh, no question. Yeah, see, Mike LaRocca, he's a drummer that we've worked with live. He's not on the recordings, but he's a young kid that goes to the new school, and he is a mighty drummer.
That's what he looks like.
That is Michael.
I think the sleeve is great too, Paul. Who's doing the artwork?
Oh, the artwork's by a guy named Gregory Jefferson. Gregory Jacobson, who does a band called Lovely Little Girls in Chicago. Gregory's great, man. Yeah, he was kind enough to give us those paintings, but I've always dug his work.
And Carving Songs is a remix album of Larva Lumps and Baby Bumps. So some great remixes by Justin Broderick, Mersbo, Mono Lake. Is that Robert Henke doing it? Remix?
It is.
Wow, that's incredible. I love Robert.
Yeah, it's funny. Tim's stories on that. It's an interesting array of artists.
Do you know Robert Henke? Yeah, that guy is so funny.
I don't know him well, but we kind of know of each other. He was super excited to do it. I love Mono Lake, and so it was great. I wish that I invited you, Kevin. It didn't even cross my mind because I hadn't spoken to you at the time. But it would have been awesome to have you in that. No, seriously.
That's good company you're keeping. Even without calling me. So like, I thought the Swarm. Justin Broderick, of course, doing fantastic job.
Justin's remix was killer.
It's killer.
I mean, he just understands heavy in a way that nobody else does. Like, Christ.
And I swear he must still use the same equipment as he did back in the 90s.
Totally.
I mean, he can get that pulverizing, just that pulverizing low end
Yeah.
and those drums. I mean, he's killer. But the stuff Justin does with Jesus is so beautiful. I mean, he's really expanded his palette of sounds so much over the years. He's great.
So let's talk a little bit about equipment now that we talked about releases and history and stuff. How has your equipment changed over the years, Paul? Very much, little, what
Well, Kevin,
what's your standby setup?
back in the day, I used to try and kind of stay relevant with, buying new keyboards and, trying to update my samplers and stuff. I completely stopped. You know what I mean? I just started using a looper and started focusing on guitar and going back to my Juno 106 and my Mini Moog and, whatever stuff that I had lying around. Chad, what is that item that I have there that when you saw it, you kind of flipped out? You said,
oh yeah, Tridex Muse.
What is it?
Tridex Muse is kind of like a random algorithmic generator. The one that he has, it's like so old. It's basically just a sine wave that's like randomly generating things in specific scales. They've got digital versions of them now, but this is like, I believe, like the first, analogous kind of version of this. It's kind of, it goes for a pretty penny now on Reverb, but yeah, it's a dope little box.
Yeah.
So I kind of became anti-gear, you know what I mean? And I just started trying to be resourceful with the things that I had, because I just played the game of trying to update my studio and keep going. And it just took me nowhere. I found that I was
shaming me,
controlled by the gear and not by my own resourcefulness.
But I like limitations in gear sounding. Don't you notice? Don't you notice now that you like that when you go back and listen to an old album, how it's not perfect? It has some shitty sounds.
Well, I do. And I found that because I was so inept at recording, that the mistakes I would make and then try to cover up really added to the pieces. I mean, people like Eno and stuff, and guys like that, they always say, mistakes can be helpful. But it's true. Sometimes, because I couldn't edit for shit and I was, very, I'm not a technical person, really. A lot of times the mistakes would force me into a place where something would have to morph into something else, where I never expected the piece to move in a direction like that, but I'd have to cover up the problem in a creative way.
So were you working with looper pedals way back in the 80s already, or how were you achieving the loops?
Well, like with the rack mount, where you could, get your thing going and then kick in your thing, and then you could slow the loop down or whatever. Those great multi-effect units that they had in like 1983. I mean, that thing that gave me a whole, realm of possibilities. And then if and then if you crack it, you get a really nice kind of echoing thing. And then you pop that loop in, it sounds like, something that, it sounds like this great dub loop. And if you change, when you record and you change speed, so I'd always had my tape decks altered so that I could have, several tape speeds. And so I was always playing with that. Of course, cutting stuff up and whatever I could do to change sound. But my technique.
That gear? Do you still have that old gear? Do you still have that exact old gear?
I still have a lot of it. I still have a Mirage sampler and a lot of crap that just collects dust. Yeah.
You got like a 16 track up there still.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, there was lots of beautiful reverb, like some of the string and the choral stuff that you were doing. Was that samples, or was that Joe's wonderful voice always? I mein, where did those beautiful chamber, like string, like I almost want to say pipe organ at times, or string sounds.
Well, the pipe organ was a great Mirage sample. The Mirage had some beautiful, beautiful samples, and that was really a liberator. When we got the Mirage sampler, that thing allowed us, a whole other kind of palette of sound. But, some of the sounds were cheese, and some of them, like the timpani and the pipe organ, were very, very great. I mean, they're great sounds still. So yeah, we'd be very careful with the sounds we used. You hope that, because the problem, of course, with electronic music is, how it dates. And sometimes you listen, you say, oh, like the M1. Sometimes I listen to those recordings we use with the M1, and, those digital keyboards sound so, I don't know, so kitschy. But then 20 years later, they sound good again. I mean, but there's a point where it just sounds like, oh man, why did I use that? It takes a while for it to sound good again.
And did you have a place where you regularly recorded your stuff? Like, was it in somebody's house or in a studio, or like how was what was the typical recording procedure? Who was the engineer?
Oh, I had taken over the upstairs of my mother's house, so
Nice.
she, and so, yeah, it was just wires all over the place and really recording pretty much on the floor. I mean, there was no aesthetic beauty to it. If you saw the studio, you'd be horrified. It's why we always kept kind of, we always kept to ourselves because we were too embarrassed to have guests up there. One time Jarbo came up when she was living with Michael Jarrah from Swans. She came up and did a vocal piece with us. And she was just horrified. I think she said something like, it was like a scene from Welcome Back, Kotter with a Vinnie Barbarino or something. I heard that this is something she wrote, and I said, wow, we were that bad. But it was wires all over the place, and I don't think we had seats. We were on the floor, and it was just, but we got really good sound for what we wanted to create, but it was done in a very, very basic way, many of those records, So yeah, my studio was always just a fucking mess, but I had the ability to, I had a good 16 track, analog machine and some decent mics, and we were able to get the sounds we wanted. But yeah, like working with somebody like Chad's studio is really quite liberating for me.
I see somebody here, Joe Virus says there is a Trax Muse on eBay right now for $5,000.
Yep.
Wow.
See,
Seriously.
that's why you never sell your old gear, because look at that world. The world has gone nuts.
I mean, that piece, we just used to do, like that piece Moon Shards on, I think it's on Headcrack. I forget now, but that was just solo. That was just a solo of that, through a delay.
Solo of that through a delay. Well, you see, folks. And you have it now, Chad? Do you have it there?
No, it's still Paul holds on to his gear. I keep trying to borrow little bits of it.
Okay.
And he's like, nah.
So
That's not going anywhere.
You got to bring it over. I would be wanted to look at Paul's collection of gear too, Chad. I'd want to be like, let me see what you got there. You probably
would make you cry. It's just like, here's this like Roland Juno with just like 2 inches of dust on it, and
that's okay.
Stuff, and it's like, why are you doing this to your gear?
Yeah, no, I don't have much gear at all, really. I don't have much at all.
What's really funny is that a lovely person sent me a JP8000 the other day. It said they didn't want it. Here, have it. And I got it.
I don't know what that is.
It's a synthesizer, Roland JP8000, and I opened it up and plugged it in, and it was like no sound. So I said, oh shit, what's weird is that I think I have a couple more of these over there in the old room where we used to have put all our live gear that we're not using right now. So I went and I grabbed them all 3 of them, and it turned them all on, and they're all doing the same non-working status. So I looked it up, and it apparently a lot of these synthesizers that were built later, I think this was like a late 90s, they build it with resistors and caps that only have a 25-year life.
Wow.
Oh, bummer.
So anything that was built at that time. So once again, proving that the old stuff was, obviously built way better. And then so kind of funny too, that sometimes you'll hang on to your old gear and then you'll open up the case and it will be like, some bugs will get into it. One time the case itself of my old 4-track, when I opened up the case, the foam had actually disintegrated into the 4-track.
Wow. Holy cow.
Foam. So if those of us that are ancient relics of the old history, go check your equipment and make sure it's not in your old case or that it still works.
So Kevin, do you keep all of the old gear that you've had through the course of your life?
I've tried to, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. I have my first synth I ever bought still, and like pretty much all the original Skinny Puppy gear.
What was the first synth?
It was a Moog multi-Moog, the 2 oscillator version.
Oh, that's cool.
It's got the ribbon wheel and huge modulation section for like a 2 oscillator synth, and that still works. So
now, is that anything similar to the Rogue? The Moog?
Yeah, Moog Rogue was, I think, if I'm not mistaken, that was a Radio Shack version that they released cheaply.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, so it was like a single oscillator synth.
Yeah, yours even has realistic written on the back of it.
Yeah.
I still use that periodically.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, I still
What's
use it.
and are you telling me you've got a brand new guitar pedal effect that you rely upon, or you actually use an old effect? Tell me you use an old effect still.
Well, I mean, I haven't really used my studio too extensively lately, but you know, the last thing, probably the last new thing that I did in that studio was on Sewer of Dreams. It was a vinyl on demand box.
Right.
And I did one new record on there. And oh yeah, I used my, you know, my old delays and my, you know, all that old stuff to try and, you know, get some of the sounds that I wanted. And it worked fine.
Being sort of like a band that is like in some cases more open form. When you guys signed with Wax Trax, did you find that to be a little bit more challenging to try and rein in sort of like the arpeggiators and like you know, sort of
it was a very daunting task to try and, you know, and then at that point we played the game to try and tailor music to that label. You know what I mean? It's always been where I just, you know, did exactly what I wanted without any kind of thought about a market or a label image. And it was just by chance that we ended up on Wax Trax. This girl had mentioned, oh yeah, I heard this particular song. She says, you know, send me a cassette of it. And she sends it to Jim Nash, and I get a call from Wax Trax out of the blue. They liked this particular song. It was Crack the Body, which was my imitation of Swans at the time. It was, no question. I mean, it was pure Swans imitation. But yeah, Jim Nash, you know, I guess he was signing a lot of stuff. And I was just shocked that, because I had solicited him, I think, around the time I was doing stuff with Subterranean, but the music was just not really for him. So yeah, I mean, when we started, it was kind of a whole new beginning of reining ourselves in and thinking about actual song structure. It was the first time I'd ever considered it, where Joe, Chris, and myself were sitting in a room and we were actually writing songs and writing melodies, but we had no sequences or anything. So we relied on tapping things out to make them sounded like sequencers, you know, so like Words of the Dying and all that stuff on Fodder Song was pretty much percussively done and then sometimes looped. You know, it wasn't, I mean, we had very, very basic stuff to, you know, to work with. But yeah, that was the first time with Wax Trax that we actually thought about writing serious melodies and songs.
It's obviously a very pure period of American musical history, and it's great that, you know, you guys were a part of it. Kind of legendary period of history in that sense, you know, in that way.
Oh yeah, Wax Trax was great. It's kind of too bad, you know, when we hopped on Wax Trax that they were sinking. You could see that they just were putting way too much stuff out and too many promos, and you know, their business practices were killing them. But yeah, it was exciting, and it really kind of, you know, put me in. I mean, it refocused my interest, you know, and it made me want to play the game a bit, you know, of being, you know, maybe a band that would be more accessible, that could play the commercial game. But it never seemed the natural course for the music. That's the thing. It always seemed like we were trying to fit ourselves into those, you know, into certain genre, as opposed to just kind of, you know, we kind of became followers, I think, at that point.
Are you still there? You're for frozen face.
I'm here.
That's such a good face, though.
It's a good face.
Thank you, Chad.
Yeah,
but I thought we kind of started to become followers, you know, with Wax Trax, as opposed to kind of following our own path. We were trying to, you know, get that certain drum sound. Like, how do we get that crack of the snare? You know what I mean? And how do we get that like hard sequency sound, like, you know, like Al is getting, you know what I mean? And I never thought that way. So in some ways, it wasn't for a long time. I wasn't comfortable with those records, but I like what we did for Wax Trax. You know,
I think so too. I think it's great. And you know, it's like you were trying a genre. You were trying something, and it still was you guys. So I mean, as far as I'm concerned, and you know, after that, you kind of I'll call it morphed into the LA the LA scene with the Tone Casualties, Gabor Supo world. Gabor is such a fucking wonderful guy, man. Did you know him?
I didn't know him. Yeah, I didn't really know him. But he seemed like a great guy. I mean, you know, he's the guy that's behind SpongeBob and like these, you know, massive animation projects, and he's doing this kind of interesting vanity label. Yeah, he seemed just open to whatever we wanted to do. But no, I didn't really know him,
Did you
unfortunately.
actually meet Roz Williams? I got a question here from.
No, I didn't.
But you guys did a song or a collab in '96.
That was through Cleopatra. They had asked us to do that, and so we
Yeah.
basically kind of just took the vocals that had been on the work and then kind of skin chamberized it, you know. But yeah, I didn't know him at all.
Yeah. God, I remember I moved to LA and I went to a gig and he was standing like right next to me, and I figured out, oh, I'll probably run into this guy again, and then it was like a month later he died. So I was like, oh, that was
Oh.
quick.
Now, Kevin, when did you leave Canada for LA?
I moved here in 1998.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I guess I've been here for longer than 20 something years, 20, coming up 24 years. It goes fast, man. The time is just ripped by.
Well, as you get older, there's no question the time accelerates. It's a little
Yes.
scary though. It really is. It's like when I think of the next 20 years, wow, 20 years from now, it's going to be a tough go.
So, Chad, you got a studio that's ready to roll there. What you got going there? What sort of equipment are you going to impose upon Paul for the next stuff when you guys get rolling?
It's funny. It's like when we're working on stuff sonically, I mean, I like a lot of analog gear, but that doesn't really resonate too well with Paul. We tend to stick to a lot of samples still. So a lot of what I use when we're working on stuff is something like the synth drum deluge,
Nice.
where it's just like, live, it's great because it streams stuff off an SD card. And so I can have a lot of loops or a lot of just continuous streams that we can kind of live mix in things like you would with a 4-track or anything else like that. You can just have like 16, 20 different streams all happening at the same time that you can kind of creatively push things into and out of, because song structure wise, when we're doing things live, due to the nature, I think, of how Paul's brain works, it's hard to have specific places where you're going into and out of a song. So, having something like that where you're treating the electronics like live mixing things versus, playing specific melodies, even though I'll keep the Nord out on stage for those moments, but a lot of it is just, finding textures that fit the mood and manipulating those samples. I love a lot of analog gear, but I've yet to be able to get any of it squeezed into the record outside of perks. And I mainly used in the modular as just a big effects processor for everything that we did on that record, where I would just pump various iterations of it through and kind of mix elements of that in and out.
Yep. And Paul, I guess the whole advent of digital sequencing and DAWs and everything, has not really probably wasn't a big part of the controlled bleeding history.
It really wasn't. I mean, I think it put me off computers quite a bit because of the MIDI systems that you'd have to try with patch bays and all this complex wiring and clocking stuff to tape. And it just was such an unbelievably agonizing job. And, we did get some beautiful pieces out of it, but it was really, it was not the way I liked to make music. So I think that I just, I kind of retreated as opposed to going forward and learning the things that I should. So like, I don't know anything about digital recording,
We need to hang out. Chad, Chad, what's your DAW of choice?
Creatively, I like to use Reaper. Teaching in school, I use Pro Tools.
Yep. So Pro Tools is kind of like, I guess, in the case of Paul's idealisms, probably the one that would be the most standardized idea to see it as a tape deck, a big tape deck.
Yeah, I think it's probably the most accessible. Yeah, but creatively, I think I just go nuts for Reaper. I think they're cool developers. I think there's a lot under the hood, but I like the tweak stuff, so it's good for that. It's a really deep black hole for people that don't like that stuff, though.
Yeah, I mean, not a lot of people say Reaper is their first choice too. I haven't even actually looked into it, but what is it that draws you into Reaper so much so over the others?
It's got its own scripting language for its built-in effect system that you can kind of get into. So you can load up a plugin, see how it's coded. You can mess around with it. That's cool. But just built-in modulation stuff. Every parameter, you want the audio from one track modulating a parameter of a VST in a different track. It's so intensely nitty-gritty with, modulation and processing. It's lightweight. I mean, it's like a 60 meg installer. It can also edit full HD video. So it's funny, I do a lot of Pro Tools videos for my students, but I always edit them in Reaper just as an underhanded fuck you to Avid, a company constantly causing me frustration with their licensing policies. So Reaper to me is just a great platform to play around on if you've got the time to sift through its hideous GUI.
What do you teach, Chad?
Audio production and post-production at a school of journalism, graduate school of journalism in the city. So specifically, take a bunch of people that don't have an invested interest in sound, but are interested in working in that medium and kind of getting them on board, enabling them to be able to record and edit and produce and master their work for specific, news related and podcast related audiences.
And that's always trained on Pro Tools, I can imagine.
Yeah, right now, it's what people ask for, so it's the best thing for resumes and stuff like that. But I mean, I used to teach Reaper for a while, but it was maybe like 10 years ago. It's still too early. It still might be too early, but I do like to proselytize that program as much as I can.
Nice. So when it comes time for you guys to like think about like performing live again, is there ever going to be a possibility, Paul, to perform any of the older material, or is that kind of like, is that kind of off the table?
Well, I mean, it's hard without a vocalist like Joey. It's really tough.
Hired.
Are you available?
I am available.
It's tough, because I mean, Joe was like really a great scat singer too. I mean, he did that kind of operatic thing, but his forte was scat singing. I mean, that guy he could move his lips just 100 miles an hour. He was he practiced hours and hours a day as a scat singer.
We've tried. We've put together some arrangements for some of the older things in rehearsals, but it just never really worked out to your liking.
Did you record any of his scat singing, or is it available?
Oh yeah, well, there's a record you might enjoy called The Breastfed Yak, and that's kind of a free jazz project that
Breastfed Yak.
The Breastfed Yak is a it was just a pure fun that we had, and that's Joey let loose. I mean, as a scat singer, yeah, you'd enjoy that.
Did you provide some instrumentation on the Breastfed Yak?
All the instrumentation. So it's and Yoshida from Ruins plays drums.
No way.
Yeah, so it's a good record actually. It was put out by David Katznelson's label. What was it called? Birdman put it out. Yeah, a few years back.
I'm going to be looking into that like right away, because that sounds like something I definully need to hear.
Oh yeah, that was kind of off the hook. It was kind of like our attempt at Cecil Taylor meets the Gods. I enjoyed that record.
There's another good name. Shit Slipper.
Shit Slipper. Horrible recording, but good name.
Absolutely classic name. Yeah, some of your the older stuff. Of course, this is the Wax Trax era, but this older stuff, Distress Signals. It was funny. You were saying that you were surprised that it came out on vinyl, and then someone was saying that this version that got released wasn't actually the version to be released. And then so you supplied the version to be released. And so there's actually two versions of it.
Well, there were two. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-oh. We lost you. Are you still there, Chad?
Oh, yeah. I'm here. I'm just watching Paul speak to nobody.
Maybe we can provide some.
Oh, hello. I think I'm back now.
I think you're back now. Okay, repeat that last sentence or two.
Yeah, no, I said that when Gary Mundy had sent me the recordings, he sent me a batch of them. And so when I went back to them like 30 years later or whatever to listen to the masters, there were two versions. So there were two versions of the cassette that he had issued. I think what had happened was that I had sent him the initial tape, and then I said, no, I don't want to go with that anymore. I want to use something else. And so he kind of put out a second version of it. So.
It's always nice though when somebody is like that devoted that they want to, release like your album and then put like this what was once an obscure tape on into like a double vinyl package. And then you play it back and it actually sounds pretty damn good.
You know,
Like this.
I mean, it's beautiful that it's beautiful that he did those, you know.
Awesome.
You know, to put those out on vinyl. Now, you know, I want to put some of the other things that never came out on vinyl, but I'm not sure that Artifact wants to go with the vinyl. Like, it's super expensive. It's hard to get. So I think they may have learned their lesson with putting our stuff out on vinyl.
I think like something happened to a major vinyl plant that made it like a lot less practical for them to be able to do that, unfortunately.
No kidding.
I think it was like one of the main vinyl plants in America basically burned down.
Huh. Oh, whoa. Okay.
I remember reading about that.
And so basically limited the availability for the vinyl industry to keep up with the situation.
Oh,
so
yeah. They talked about like 9 months, you know.
Yeah, now it takes 9 months for a turnaround.
Wow.
For your album to come out. So, you know, that's.
And the idea of new plants is just that won't happen.
The idea of what?
Like creation of new vinyl plants, though, is something that's not really.
Yeah, it seems like it's kind of like you know, something from the past. It's like this great old era of lost technology again that needs to be invested in. People are like, what vinyl record plant? What the hell do you think I am, a dinosaur?
Yeah, it's true. Well, you know, I mean, it was strange to me because I really thought the vinyl thing was going to be a novelty. I didn't really think it was going to take legs for as long as it has. But I mean, it's here, and it seems like vinyl is just what people want.
I think it's back. You know, if I really love an album now, I'll actually say, okay, I need to hear this on vinyl. There's something about it, like, just plays an extra level of goodness.
Now, Kevin, do you think that the CD is going to have its rebirth?
The CD?
Yeah.
You know, it's really funny. I've got a giant CD collection, and I don't find myself going through my CDs ever. I always turn to the vinyl, and I'm always going through the vinyl, always. Yeah. So I don't know if that's a situation that a lot of you find yourselves in out there, but I just find like maybe it's the glasses, maybe the fact I can't read liner notes anymore unless I have my glasses on, and they made them too small.
Oh, maybe, huh? I don't know. I mean, I think, and for kids, like when you look at what they're playing vinyl on, close and play, like it used to be like, you know, the elementary school record players, like how in the world can you play a record on that piece of shit? But
yeah.
You know, like dealing with students every day, they're always coming up to me and asking me to listen to things on their phone. And it's like, you say, you know, there's no fidelity. Like, what a disposable way to listen to music. You know, and that's kind of the frustration too, of investing a lot of time in record and then knowing that, you know, for a lot of people, it's never going to be played that way.
Do your students come to you and talk to you about music you've made?
They're continuously doing research, and they're fascinated by the idea that they uncover these things. But I kind of keep it away from school because, you know, I think some of it is rather unsavory for their Catholic school minds. So I've always kept that as a separate life. But yeah, they do. I mean, with the internet, like every friggin' thing that you've ever said is public.
I don't know. You could play the music from the Scourging Ground, and it could be seen as semi-religious.
Oh, there's no question about it. But when they get something like, you know, like a Skin Chamber record, and they start trying to figure the lyrics, that becomes problematic, you know. Or a kid came up to me and said, "Mr. Lemos, penis party? What kind of title is that?" I said, "Well, we don't have to discuss that particular title now. Let's talk about, you know, pronouns." But you know, so the internet bites me in the ass a lot.
You know, they love it. You know, they love it. If they investigated it, they love it.
Oh yeah. It's, you know, they continuously investigate it, you know, so what can you say? But yeah, I mean, not that they understand it or like it. And the funny thing is with Spotify and stuff is they have no sense of what, you know, a record might be like, the way something was organized to listen to it as a kind of sonic journey. They're listening to, you know, one song and then, well, what's this distress signals thing? And then what's this thing that sounds like classical music? Like there's no sense of continuity, you know?
Yeah. I mean, the last thing I want to talk to you about from your past again is your dub era. I'm a huge dub fan, and I'm gathering, Paul, were you playing the bass lines?
Yeah. Most of those taken from, you know, great reggae tracks.
Yeah, but that's part of dub, is like there is a language, and you know you have the prose, and so like I gather you must have been inspired by by some good dub in your life? Do you?
Oh, I've loved it. I mean, Jamaican music I've loved since I heard Natty Dread when I was a kid. That was probably my introduction. The third Island album by the Wailers.
You know, it's really weird is that I've been listening to dub for, decades. And then the other day, 2 weeks ago, I heard this record by Prince Douglas. And I've never heard of Prince Douglas before. And so I ran it past my dub expert, Ryan Moore from Twilight Circus. And he filled me in. He said, yeah, it's very, very obscure Bullwackies label from New York City.
Mm-hmm.
Are you aware of the Bullwackies?
I know Bullwackies. Oh, yeah. I know Bullwackies, but I don't know if his name is Prince Douglas. Prince Douglas. I don't think I know him.
I'm going to forward you the link on this album. It's just, somebody had said on the comment, it's like, wow, thanks for posting this. I've been listening to this every day. And I thought, this dub album's not going to be, I put it on and then now I'm listening to it every day. So there's something about it that the production, I know Basic Channel came along and has been re-releasing all the Bullwacky stuff. So there's something about the way those records were produced there in New York that was like its own, again, unique dub world, apart from Jamaica and apart from London. So, I mean...
Now, with Bullwackies, I was never sure whether they were actually produced in New York or just released in New York, but produced in Jamaica. See, I always thought that they were Jamaican recordings that were just issued in New York.
Yeah, I'll have to find out that.
I don't know.
Right, you could be right.
Yeah. But I mean, like the Jamaican recordings, did you ever have Jamaican albums where they looked like they were run over, a couple of times and bubbles and everything else? I mean, trying to play them was always a real challenge. Yeah.
Man, there was nothing like going down and buying the records in the stores in Jamaica because you could tell they're hand pressed stuff, hand labeled, hand pressed, and man, it always sounds so good. But I mean, the dub era, that you guys went, that was with Brian, right? Hypnotic.
Well, some of it was the really great one that I think we put out. One of my favorite records that we did was actually on Dossier, and it came out on like East West Europe, called Songs from a Shallow Grave, and that's a record that seems never to really have gotten much notice, but that one was the record. It just brought together that dub component with Joe's vocals, kind of a monastic dub that was. I don't know. It was just a record I love.
I listened to it last night. I enjoyed it as well. I think there's this site out there that it says, what is Controlled Bleeding's most, like the fans' picks as the favorite albums? I think that was like second on the fan picks.
Now that's interesting.
The first was Body Samples, and then it went straight to the dub.
That's weird. I mean, that's weird. That is.
Have you been listening to dub all along, or was it something that basically just came along, or was it something that you was inside?
Oh no, for years. I mean, for just since I was very young. I mean, like probably since I was, I guess maybe last years of high school into like first years of college, because we had JP Records on Jamaica Avenue here, and I mean, just a reggae treasure trove. So once I was able to drive, I'd be down in Jamaica Avenue buying whatever. So I was always listening to dub. And that was just kind of like, as far as just, it was strange that, like Joe and I could just tap into this thing live, just laying down bass and drum parts and then just kind of layering melodies and vocals. It just seemed kind of, again, a natural.
Yeah. Well, I think all the worlds that you have explored, been at least enjoyed by me. The Merzbow component, I want to see more of that come along. I mean, it kind of seems like he understands like where you're headed to. And as I said, I think that there's a future waiting for Paul Lemos and Chad in Japan.
Who knows? Maybe. We've never gone. We haven't gone. I'd love to go to Japan, but it would be very interesting to play there.
Paul, you really need to go. I think it will inspire you like about 100 times over, and then basically it'll just come back and you'll just like spill it all out onto Chad's Reaper.
So Kevin, how many times have you been to Japan?
21 times, I think.
Holy
Wow,
crap.
seriously.
The only reason I know that is because we were actually, when COVID came along, we were on our way to Japan. We were just about to leave, and then they said, no, you can't go. And I have a gig that I have booked there that I got paid in advance for that I got to go and do. So that's the first thing I'm going to do once once everything gets back to normal, is get back there. So
I would think Skinny Puppy would do quite well in Japan.
Skinny Puppy it's really funny. I've never been there with Skinny Puppy just on my own. I just play solo shows and just like most of my solo material. And Skinny Puppy was, I think, more popular there in the 90s, but now the kids don't know anything. Just basically.
Well, they don't.
Yeah.
I was talking to some students just 2 days ago, and I was saying, well, do you know bands like Nine Inch Nails? Because they were asking me about music or whatever. And I said, well, do you know bands like Nine Inch Nails? No. I said, you never heard of Nine Inch Nails? None of them. No. You have no idea who that is. I mean, that's
he's
not
just
really
a composer now.
Yeah. I mean, but Trent Reznor's just has a serendipitous career. That's just the way it is,
Has it been interesting for you to witness that band that didn't have an album out yet on the stage that night when we played in New York that night rise to the level that they have? Could you see that coming?
Well, I mean, like I said, there was a buzz in New York before that show that you just kind of knew that this guy was going to succeed. I don't know, people that had heard whatever, it was understood that record was going to be huge, So the record was in the works if it wasn't out yet. But yeah, it's been very interesting to see him, become a composer and kind of fly by, all of these people in their industrial ghetto. Yeah, it's been fascinating,
Yeah, we're going to play a big show with those guys in France next June, and it has like pretty much everybody. Paul, I figured the Controlled Bleeding should be on the bill too, since they got everybody else.
Well, Cold Wave never invites us to play or whatever. So it's like, I don't know. It's kind of like, we're
will now.
Yeah,
they will
maybe.
Now. They will now after this chat. You hear that, Cold Waves guys? Yeah.
Well, that's why we stopped playing live. We were getting really, really, really good, and it was just so frustrating, just like that we didn't have a place, an outlet to perform. It's kind of like we thought we'd maybe hop onto something, but I don't know. It's just, I guess the problem is being stuck in a job. You know what I mean? You can't really be out there and push yourself the way that would have to.
And Joe Virus says right on the side here, he will book you in Dallas. He's the man to talk to. There's quite a few people. Once the word gets out, Joe, spread the word. Here, okay. He's going to pass it on to Jason at Cold Waves. Here we go.
Yeah. Well, Jason knows because Artifact had talked to them when we put out, Baby Bumps and stuff. But I guess they felt that we weren't quite right, for the thing that they were doing. But
dude, if you
I don't know about Chad, but if it was worthwhile to get back in the fray, we'd play live again though. Because we were getting very, very good. We were getting very good.
This
I love playing live,
guys. This is the impetus to the beginning of the new Controlled Bleeding, and here it is, people. Spread the word, and you shall have them.
Well, once we have our Profound Lore recording set, once we kind of know what we're doing, and we unleash these things, then it might make sense.
So Chad, when's Paul going to be over?
It's funny. It's hard to get him on the road. He's like, I'm out of town this weekend.
Everybody a flow to your schedule. Whenever you guys get there, I'll make the announcement. Just let me know. Keep me posted. I'm sure everybody wants to know. Guys,
Kevin, very nice of you, man. We appreciate it.
Guys, if any help I can lend to, let me know. If you need anything.
I appreciate the support, man.
You guys rule. Thank you so much for joining us here today and spreading some of the love and info. And big love out to the East Coast there. I see it's probably dinner time. You guys tummies are probably growling. Thank you very much for joining us today, Paul and Chad.
Kevin, thank you, man. It was great to talk to you today. Chad,
thanks, man.
Always beautiful.
Always, man.
Okay, I look forward to hearing from you guys soon about these plans. Okay.
Take care, Kevin. Thank you.